Hey, it's Katie, and welcome back to my booktube channel. Today I thought it'd be really fun to do the A to Z Bookish Survey, which is kind of a really fun way for you guys to get to know me since I've had this channel for almost 6 months now. But these prompts and everything was originally from the Perpetual Page Turner blog, so I will link the original blog post below. But basically there's prompts and questions that start with each letter of the alphabet, so since there's 26 things, let's just jump right into it. A is the author you've read the most books from, and this one was kind of hard for me to figure out because I feel like I've read about 3 books from a lot of different authors, but I think the author I've read the most from is probably Cassandra Clare because I've read the first 2.5 books from the Mortal Instruments series, and I've read all 3 books in the Infernal Devices, so probably her books, I think. B is for best sequel ever, and I definitely cannot choose just one. This is super hard, so I have like a top 4 or 5, so bear with me. First, we have Legendary from the Caraval series by Stephanie Garber, which I'm obsessed with. And then we have Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi, which that one was amazing. I went through so many emotions reading that one. And then I also thought of Clockwork Prince and Clockwork Princess, which are books 2 and 3 in the Infernal Devices series by Cassandra Clare. And then the most recent one that I read was A Court of Mist and Fury from the ACOTAR series by Sarah J. Maas. I've only read the first 2 books in the series, but I'm absolutely obsessed with them, especially the second book. I went and I put tabs by all of my favorite quotes, and there are so many tabs in that book. So I cannot choose between any of the books that I just mentioned, but those are all very great sequels. C is for currently reading, and currently I am reading Cinderella is Dead by Kailyn Bayren. I'm about 100 pages in, and I'm really loving it so far. This is a Cinderella retelling where it takes place about 200 years after Cinderella existed, and all of the girls in the society are forced to attend this ball where they are supposed to be chosen by men within the society, and if they're not chosen, they're never heard from again. And our main character totally disagrees with that and wants nothing to do with it, and ends up fleeing and meeting one of Cinderella's last living descendants, and together they vow to take down the king and this whole system. So it's definitely a very cool twist on a Cinderella story, and it's very good so far. D is for drink of choice while reading, and it is definitely tea. I am definitely a tea person through and through. It doesn't really matter if it's hot tea or like iced tea, but since it's colder now, I definitely prefer to go for some hot tea. E is for e-reader or physical book. I read a lot of both, honestly, but I prefer to have a physical book. I love holding it in my hands and staring at the cover and everything about just laying down on a couch and reading a physical book. I love that so much. F is for a fictional character you probably would have dated in high school, and this one is hard for me because a lot of my favorite book boyfriends are like the bad boy type, which I don't think I ever would have actually dated in high school. So the only other one I can think of is Jack from Tweet Cute by Emma Lord, because he's kind of sarcastic and sassy, but he's also really sweet, and he can cook and bake, and that's really fun. So he's really the only one I could think of. G is for Glad You Gave This Book a Chance, and I would probably have to say Caraval by Stephanie Garber because at that point I wasn't really reading a lot of books, but it was at the beginning of quarantine and I had had this book for almost a year, so I decided to pick it up since I was really bored one day, and I'm so glad I did because I fell back in love with reading and it inspired me to start this channel, so definitely that one. H is for Hidden Gem, and I would probably have to choose Even If the Sky Falls by Mia Garcia. I adored this book. It is a very adorable romance that takes place in New Orleans, and our 2 main characters need an escape from their lives, so they go by fake names and basically experience all the city has to offer during Mardi Gras for 24 hours. And so it's a really cool adventure, and the characters and the city just jump off the page, and I will always have a special place in my heart for this book. I is for Important Moment in Your Reading Life, And I feel like I'd probably have to choose in 4th grade when I saw one of my friends reading the Twilight series, and I really enjoyed reading at that point, but I didn't really read a lot of big series. That was like my first young adult series that I started, and I decided to try Twilight, and I think I binged that whole series within a few weeks, and I really just fell in love with reading even more in that moment, so I'd probably have to say that one. J is for just finished, and last night I just finished Catching Jordan by Miranda Keneally, and I've been really loving short romance books recently, especially in the month of February, and the main character of this one is the quarterback of her high school football team, so that was a really fun dynamic of her with all of her teammates who are guys, and to watch their friendships and everything, so it was a really fun read. K is for kinds of books you won't read, and I like to think that I give all genres a shot, but I definitely do tend to avoid any sci-fi or any like horror books. It just doesn't really work for me. I tend to stick to like contemporary fantasy and romances for sure. L is for longest book you've ever read, and recently it was A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas, which I think is a little over 600 pages, but I think the longest book I've ever read was Breaking Dawn by Stephanie Meyer. I think that's like 750 pages, so I'm pretty sure that's the longest one I've ever read. M is for major book hangover, and I think the one that gave me the longest book hangover was probably A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas, which I've talked about a few times in this video already, but it was a few days after that book before I was able to pick up another book because I just kept thinking about those characters and the romance, and that's all I really thought about. It definitely consumed my thoughts. N is for number of bookcases you own, and I own 3. There's just 2 that you see behind me. My fiance made me both of these bookshelves, and then I have a smaller bookshelf out in the living room, which honestly doesn't have a lot of books on it. It's mostly just like cookbooks and little like word search books and everything. So most of my books are on these shelves. O is for one book you have read multiple times, and the first one I thought of was Beautiful Disaster by Jamie Maguire, which I actually haven't read in a while, but this was a very well-loved book that I read probably all through like middle school and high school. I can't even tell you how many times I've read it, but it's like your typical like bad boy, enemies to lovers, very like angsty story. So this is definitely one of my go-to books. P is for preferred place to read, and I honestly can read pretty much anywhere, but typically I like to read on the couch or in a chair. Sometimes I read in bed, but I tend to get like a little too comfy and then want to sleep, so I basically just like to sit when I read. Q is for the quote that inspires you or gives you all the feels. And I'm going to go with one that gives me all of the feels because there are a lot in A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. That's definitely one of my favorite books that I've read this year, as you could probably tell. But I have so many tabs of my favorite moments. But the one I can tell you guys without spoiling things is at the very beginning, which is just, "Hello, Feyre, darling." That's when Rhys kind of swoops in to whisk Feyre off for the bargain that they made in the first book. That wasn't really explained very well. Sorry. But that was just a very great moment at the beginning of the story. And then I also really loved a bunch of quotes on page 528 and 529. So if you've read it, then you can go ahead and check it out, but I didn't want to spoil anything for you guys, but that's definitely some of my favorite quotes of this book. R is for reading regret, and I can't really think of any books or anything that I regret. The only thing I can really regret, technically, is not reading some of these series sooner, because if there's a book or series that's getting a lot of hype, I tend to put it off just because it kind of makes me nervous when so many people are saying amazing things about it. So, for instance, ACOTAR, I put that off for a very long time, but I'm very glad that I jumped into the series this month, and I definitely regret not starting it sooner. So I don't know if that's like a cop-out answer, but I don't really have a lot of reading regrets, so we're just gonna go with that. S is for series you've started that you need to finish. And for this one, I'm going to go with An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. I've only read book 1, but I really, really loved it. And now that all of the books in that series are out, I definitely have no excuse to not read the rest of it. So I really need to get on that. T is for 3 of your all-time favorite books. And I'm just going to go with the first 3 that pop in my head because there are a lot. And first one is Kingdom of the Wicked by Kerri Maniscalco. I'm obsessed. And then A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas, which obviously you can tell that I enjoyed. And then Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi, which I was also obsessed with when I read it. U is Unapologetic Fangirl 4. And basically any enemies to lovers with like a bad boy love interest. I am definitely a fangirl for all of those, especially the 3 books that I just mentioned, Kingdom of the Wicked, A Court of Mist and Fury, and Children of Virtue and Vengeance. A lot of the guys and the romances in those stories are enemies to lovers with bad boys, so definitely a huge fangirl for all of those. V is for very excited for this release above all of the other releases this year. And this one is so hard because there are a ton of releases this year that are going to be amazing and I cannot wait for. But I'd probably say Kingdom of the Cursed by Kerri Maniscalco because that's definitely, I think, my all-time favorite book that I've read this year and definitely one of my favorites of all time. So I'm very excited for book 2 coming out in the fall, and I don't know how I'm going to wait that long. W is for Worst Book Habit, and I really can't think of too many things that I do because I don't really like dog ear the pages or do anything like that. And if you do that, that's totally fine. That's just not what I like to do. But I don't really have any habits like that. The only thing I do is at the beginning of every chapter, I always count to see how many pages it is. So I don't know if that's a bad habit, but I definitely do that for every chapter I read. X is for X marks the spot. Pick the 27th book on your shelf starting in the top left. And that is actually out of frame, so I'm just going to cut to when I have the book in my hands. My 27th book on my shelf is The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory, and this is an adult romance with fake dating where our 2 main characters get stuck in an elevator together, and he basically asks if she will be his fake girlfriend for his ex-girlfriend's wedding, and so they go and pretend that they're dating, and it basically ends up turning into a little more than they planned. Y is for your latest book purchase, and the most recent things that I bought were the whole ACOTAR series. I wanted to make sure that I was able to binge them all if I wanted, so I have all of them back here, except for the newest one. I haven't had a chance to get that yet, but also all the ones I have are paperbacks, and I think it only came out in hardcover, so I probably have to wait, which I'm kind of sad about. But I bought all of those, and then I also finally got Circe by Madeline Miller, so I'm very excited to read that too. Z is for Z Snatcher, so which book last made you stay up way past your bedtime? And for this one, you could probably tell from this video what it is. It is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. I could not put that book down, and it's also a very big book. So it took me a while to read, but I definitely stayed up later than I should have because I needed to know what was going to happen, and I was very invested in that relationship. All right, so that is the end of the A to Z Bookish Survey. Hopefully you guys got to know me a little bit better. And if you have any other questions for me, I would love to answer them in the comments. And also, if you have any video suggestions, I would love to hear those too. But please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate that. And if you do subscribe, click the notification bell so you know when I upload next. Thank you guys so much for watching. I can't wait to see you in my next video.